Hi, everybody. This is Bergen Sullivan here with JCSI. I'm here today with Serguei Zaychenko, joining us for another interview in our Talent Chronicles series. Thanks so much for being here with us today.
It's a pleasure, Bergen.
So, you're a highly accomplished executive search professional with experience in several different industries, most recently in the financial services and the media and internet sectors. Could you give us just a quick background of how you got into talent acquisition?
Oh, it's actually an interesting story, almost serendipitously. I was working at a small financial analytics company on the Wall Street. I like to call it a mini Bloomberg, of course, not of that brand. One of those days, I got a call from a headhunter, and the headhunter told me that a premier executive search firm, Russell Reynolds Associates, was looking for someone with my type of background and qualifications. And at that point in time, I didn't really have any idea about executive search, executive recruiting, corporate world, but it was an interesting offering. I agreed. They hired me. And then I quickly realized that actually in the position of analytic with a search firm, you are essentially in the middle office. And the action and quite honestly, the money are in the front office. So I put the two and two together and decided that I wanted to be involved with recruiting, actual search. And then joined a small boutique search firm where I started screening candidates almost immediately, interviewing them. And that's where I cut my teeth, so to say, on assessment, evaluation, and candidate presentations. The rest is kind of history. I've been lucky throughout my career to have been involved with some top-notch corporate brands, both in financial services, fintech, as well as in media, internet, and e-commerce. And I've been both on the agency side, about half of my career, and the other half in-house as a corporate recruiter.
Okay. And in terms of that experience, what are some differences that you see both in the agency and the in-house side in hiring great leaders now versus 15 years ago or back when you were first starting your career?
Right. Well, let me parse this question into two. So the difference between being on the agency side or search side and in-house. And I like to call it being a servant of many masters when you're on the agency side, i.e. you're working with multiple clients at any given time. Whereas when you are in-house, you have essentially one master, your own company that you recruit for. When it comes to executive search and talent acquisition, and again, to qualify, throughout my career, I've been involved or focused on recruiting for C-level positions, CEOs, COOs, general managers, as well as their direct reports and maybe one level down. So that's sort of the top of the house. And interestingly, the approach and the criteria to finding great candidates haven't really changed that much in the past 15, 20 years that I've been in the industry. However, what has changed is the type of qualities that back in the day were almost secondary to the best candidate profile, now have become almost paramount. And I'm not necessarily talking about technical skills and experience. That is a given. So you're looking for a candidate who has the industry experience, has the technical skill set. But what has become extraordinarily important these days in the context of the socio-political change, market change that is happening, and of course the pandemic and the huge impact, the massive impact of this crisis on the society, soft qualities, personal attributes, leadership characteristics have become the driver of the selection and ultimately adoption of senior executive or recruitment of senior executives. There may be that many geniuses there who dropped out of college, started a great business, and grew it to become an iconic brand, or two or three, and we all know who those leaders are. But these are more of exceptions. When it comes to hiring a senior executive, be that a CEO of a company or any other C-level position, typically companies are looking for a combination of leadership as well as intellectual qualities, as well as emotional intelligence, EQ. Lots of cliches here, but we can't go without them. If the vocabulary had different words or new words, then I'd be using them, but I have to default to those old and tried cliches. And they're still true, even today, when I'm looking at an executive and I'm trying to understand how would they fit my client, the company that I represent. Will they be a long-term hire? Will they be a successful hire? What's in it for them? Will they benefit from this match, from this alliance or marriage, however you call it? So all these factors come into equation when you look at senior executives. It's probably more straightforward, a little bit more black and white, hiring for more junior positions with less experience, with less scope of responsibility. But when it comes to running a business, growing a business, scaling, innovating, creating new products, winning new markets, acquiring new customer segments and demographics, it almost requires the type of executive, and I'm not afraid to use this word, a Renaissance man. I used to be a big fan of another concept 10, 15 years ago, a best athlete. And let me compare the two. A best athlete is someone who, just as in sports, they are absolutely fantastic in what they do, and they're so innately smart and capable that they can learn a new skill or a new industry or a new career path even fairly easily, because they are agile, because they're flexible, because they are intellectually adept. That's the best athlete. And some of the most successful hires that I've made in my career were of those types. Now, switching to the Renaissance man, this is someone who has a different profile, obviously. It's a broad scope of interests, from philosophy to mathematics. And I'm simplifying, of course, here a little bit, but just to give you a flavor of what the breadth of experiences and interests of a Renaissance man is. But I do believe that in today's world, in today's talent acquisition for senior level positions, a Renaissance man can be a lot more successful, and in fact is almost required to be there in order to intellectually get their arms, get their head around the business and the challenges, in order to understand the connections that may not even be obvious to other people, connect the dots, to have that foresight based on the comprehensive nature of the experience and understanding of many facets of life and human nature, and ultimately be able to come up with creative solutions that will be different, that will differentiate the business from the competition. It is especially important today when technology has become such a huge driver. Everything is technology whenever you look at it. The pandemic actually has accelerated, in many cases, the adoption of technology. When we're talking about, for example, cloud computing. A few years ago, cloud computing was more of an esoteric concept that a limited number of companies were exposed to or aware of or willing to get involved with. But with the pandemic, everyone all of a sudden realized that we're now moving more and more toward the digitization. And the cloud is something that provides information security and protection, easy access, more advanced, more sophisticated data management. So that's just one example. And obviously you and I are aware of many, many examples of how technology is impacting our lives, whether it's professional lives, personal lives, social interactions. So understanding of technology is important. But in my humble opinion, for a Renaissance man, it is equally important to have a philosophical perspective, a perspective on how the population trends and demographic trends are impacting the talent markets. And that obviously here we're dealing with a combination of millennials in the market, but also a more mature population, just choosing my words carefully here, still staying, the baby boomers, in other words, still staying in the market and continuing to be in the workforce. So all these convergence of these factors and the need, or I would even say the requirement of having this broader world outlook, a Renaissance man's outlook, is what, in my opinion, would drive executive talent search and talent acquisition going forward.
All right, and going into that technological advances and how they're changing pretty much everything and they're changing every day, what type of technological advances have impacted the executive search process and how have you seen that kind of evolve?
Technology has impacted executive search probably a bit less than more general or more high volume staffing, where you have a lot more automation of processes and the application software platforms that allow employers to process massive amounts of applications, schedule hundreds, if not thousands of interviews, interview online or through video. There's a ton of companies out there who have come up with technology solutions for high volume hiring. With executive search, it is still a lot more of a human touch, a lot more of a human connection. However, I can envision some of the aspects of candidate assessment being automated and turning into something that I would call a combination of machine learning and artificial intelligence. And let me expand a little bit on that. So imagine a scenario where a senior executive is being interviewed by the company board. And of course, after multiple interviews in person with the board members, they would like to test his ability to problem solve. And for that, there could be a program, a software, which includes simulated situations or scenarios, business cases that can be presented to the candidate. And while as the candidate is giving their answers to questions or solving those business cases, the robotics or the avatar behind this program is learning about the individual's approach, way of thinking, and tweaking or adjusting those scenarios on the go so that they're being presented in a new way with a new challenge. So it's sort of like you start with one business case, and as you are solving it, then the machine behind it, the robot, the avatar, is throwing additional challenges, some extra what-if scenarios at you. It can take a couple of hours, the whole exercise, but it does put the candidate under pressure. It pushes them to the limit of their ability to think on their feet, to quickly react to unexpected changes in the scenario, which in real life it probably is not going to possible at this point if you have just a human interaction. The machines can learn faster. They can come up with a more diverse range of scenarios. And the whole concept of integrating technology with the human process or human touch, I think will be what will determine the outcome of the evaluation in the future.
Okay, sure. So kind of a mix of the both human interaction and the technological.
Correct.
Going into kind of some skills and qualities that you look for in a candidate, what would you say are some qualities that make a candidate a good candidate in terms of leadership skills? And once you identify those candidates, how do you go after them and try to bring them on and recruit them?
Right. It's kind of a loaded question because everyone is looking for candidates that represent the absolute best kind of A type. And there is by definition, there is a finite pool of these folks. So how can you ensure that you are able to collect or to pipeline enough candidates for your search? Well, on the one hand, I'm a big believer in personal networks, building over time connections with leaders, having multiple conversations, more informal than formal. Could be a cup of coffee, could be a quick phone call, could be a periodic update every 6 months or so. And as you build that personal connection, personal network, you're understanding better the drivers, you're also understanding better the qualities that differentiate the candidates. And ultimately, you start building your own profile of a candidate based on your definition of the ideal candidate. So this is a generalized statement. To be more specific and to answer your question, and I'm going to put aside the pure technical skill set, such as knowledge of the business, of the industry, experience in mergers and acquisitions or scaling the company. These are more of the hardcore skill set. The soft side of the equation becomes, again, to my earlier point, almost predominant in assessing the candidate. And here I would single out 3 or 4 qualities that I try to focus on, and that is their ability to think strategically. A cliche is out of the box. I don't necessarily like that cliche, but I do try to understand how the candidates react to unforeseen circumstances and what is their historic track record of coming with creative and innovative solutions. That's one. The second one is emotional intelligence. This is now extraordinarily important because in dealing with people at all levels, you have to really have a good read and to be able to connect and relate. The society has become so complex. The types of candidates, the types of the workforce have become so multiple. So the gig economy, the gig workers now are a big part of it. We didn't have it that pronounced 10 years, 15 years ago. So when you're dealing with different demographics, so to say, of the talent force, a good leader needs to understand what is motivating them, what is driving them, what is important to them, and absolutely must create an environment and culture that will be responsive to those differentiated needs and wants of different talent populations. So that's EQ, in my interpretation. And last but not least is the personal integrity. Again, it is just as important as it was 15, 20 years ago and before. But quite honestly, with the degree of transparency now and with the expectation of greater accountability, you can run, run, and keep running, and maybe the further you run, you'll be able to hide 15, 20 years ago. Not anymore. Without naming names, I'll just point out to a couple of examples of recent debacles in the executive world. The CEO of a major fast food restaurant chain was fired by the board for improper behavior. A Hollywood mogul was indicted and, in fact, sentenced for his transgressions. So I think that the fact that we now are dealing with social movements that are so focused on increasing transparency and providing more requiring or demanding more accountability puts the boards, corporate boards, puts the C-suites under a magnifying glass even more than before. So what I'm looking for is an absolute impeccable reputation and the sense of comfort that this individual, that the candidate is going to be true to their values and true to their word. How do you assess that? You know, how do you ensure that how the individual, how the candidate comes across and presents themselves is true to who they are? It's not easy. It requires, again, a lot of personal interaction and also understanding the ecosystem that the individual has been part of, learning other people that they've interacted throughout their career, connecting with them informally, because we all know that the references are only as good as the people who gives them. And you hardly get negative references when you do the formal referencing process. So informal referencing, informal fact-checking becomes even more important. And how you get to that, again, by building those personal networks of connections of people that know people and can vouch for them.
Absolutely. You covered a lot there. I really appreciate all of that. Are there any other final thoughts that we didn't get to touch upon or anything that you didn't like to share that you would like to?
Well, I wanted to thank you for the opportunity to join this initiative, the series, and to contribute my thoughts. Again, these are my personalized experiences and things that I've learned throughout my very rewarding career. I love search. I love talent acquisition. I love the hunt, if you would. I'm a hunter at heart. I think that this is one of the best careers that one can wish for themselves because of its richness, because of its satisfaction, and ultimately I would like just to say that going forward, executive search will continue to be a major contributor to the success of companies, and that the more investments they make into executive recruiters and executive search, the more effective the function will become ultimately.
All right, absolutely. Thank you so much again for joining us today in another series of our Talent Chronicles series.